It looks past great if you shrink and insert.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. How are you? That's great. Good. I know I should wait for a response from you guys. But it doesn't really matter because we never really care about that response, right? We always say, hi, how you doing? I'm not waiting for someone to say, you know what, I'm not doing well. What am I going to do? Right? All right, so let's go ahead and get started then. Let's see here. So we had that group assignment, or we had this group assignment. And so just right before we left, I went ahead and told you of this one group assignment that you need to work on. And when does that due, by the way? Tonight? One tonight, one tomorrow? Okay. So here is probably the one that's due tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. Correct? And so once again, just in case you were wondering, what you're supposed to go ahead and do with this one is you're going to go ahead and sort of, just follow the directions here. And whatever answer you come up with, you need to go ahead and paste the answer into this environment right here, into this white cell. And as you remember, I indicated that you're going to go ahead and use the snipping tool in Windows. And you're going to go ahead and, So what will occur is you will use the snipping tools, and this will allow you to go ahead and just, let's just say, take some area of the screen. And of course, in your case, it's going to be the DOS window that contains your SQL script, along with the message that you're getting back from Oracle. And you will get a copy of that, and then you'll just go ahead and paste it into the white cell. There it is. And of course, you want to make it nice and just pretty. So you want to go ahead and just make it small so it's not taking up too much space. And that's it. And you want to go and do that for each and every question. So many of you, of course, what will occur is you will just wait until the very last minute. And so you'll be running out of time. And of course, you can't do the print screen because you don't have enough time, so you'll just type in the SQL statement. And of course, when you do that, you don't have time to go in and check to find out if your SQL statement is correct or not. So that's not what we want. We want to make sure that you're actually typing it in and checking it. All right, so there is that. Any questions? Yes?
You said that that's a group assignment?
So I guess maybe I should just tell you. I mean, it's so you can actually go in and get the help of your peers here. And so this means that there could be some plagiarism involved. Although plagiarism is not a good idea because you can't really learn too much. But certainly you can go and get the assistance of other people. But whether you work alone or whether you work in a group, everyone in the group is going to have to go and turn in their own version. Yeah? All right. Anyone else? Yes?
So with
this homework right here, do you write it? Do you type up the code that you do in the DOS window, and then you just print the screen or print the message that comes afterwards?
That's right. So you just go ahead and put in, let's just say this is the SQL prompt, okay? And you just go ahead and put in, I don't know, describe like yo, and then you do this. And then when you do this, it comes back with some kind of an error message or some kind of a message from Oracle, and you just go ahead and copy and paste all of the stuff that you typed in along with the message from Oracle, and you paste it into the white cell.
Okay.
Yeah? Yes, sir.
So each individual command that you do, or just the entire thing?
There is no, yeah, so you just go ahead and this white cell, you go ahead and do all the stuff for just that question. For this white cell, you go ahead and do the stuff only for that question. So every question will have its own print screen. Anyone else? So just, and then you just give me the Word document. So save your stuff with that in a Word document and just give me, just upload the Word documents. All right, so I guess with that in mind, we can go ahead and close this. So we are done with this. Goodbye. And let's come back here to the world of Oracle. And if you remember with Oracle, we mentioned that there's some stuff going on here. We said that you're able to go ahead and create a table. So you create a table. And then of course you go ahead and define your column and the type, and then you put a comma here, column and the type. And then if you want, you can go ahead and continue on, and you can go ahead and just put some constraint information here. And then you put a comma there. And then you can go ahead and put another one here. And then you can actually have more constraint information as it pertains to that column. And then as you're done with all of your column stuff, you could even have your constraint information here as well. And that's what you have. So what you will notice is that you have constraints at what level? At the column level. And you have constraints at the table level. Yes? Constraints at the column level, the column definition stuff is still continuing because that's where the comma is. And then you go ahead and put in all the various constraints, primary key, unique key, whatever. Whereas with this one, all of your column definitions are over and done with. And then you just go ahead and identify with the constraints. Now, the only difference between the syntax in this case is that in this case, when you go ahead and create your constraint, let's just say you want to go ahead and create a primary key constraint. You say primary key, and then you put that. Now, of course, we know that primary key is associated with that column, yes? But in this case, when we are at the table level, all the columns have been defined. Now, we need to go and identify which column is going to be associated with the primary key. So if we do say primary key, we need to go and identify the column that is going to be involved in that. Yes? Now, we also know one thing. We also know that if you're dealing with a composite primary key, do we have a choice in whether we make it a column level or a table level constraint?
Table.
It's got to be a table level. We have no choice. And what we mean by that, if we have a primary key that is comprised of multiple columns, it has to be at this level right there. And then we also indicated that there's this thing called the constraint keyword. When do we use the constraint keyword? When you want to go ahead and come up with a name. Because if you don't come up with a name, what happens? Yes, Oracle will come up with a name. What's wrong with the Oracle name?
You can tell what's meaning.
It sucks. It looks ugly. It's got too many numbers. It makes absolutely no sense. And so you go ahead and use constraint, and then you go and come up with some name. And then we said that when you're coming up with a name, you want to go and use this convention. And the convention is really quite simple. You go ahead and just come up with a name, and then you go ahead and just suffix it with, these acronyms, like for example, PK, UK, FK, CK, so that we know what kind of constraint we're dealing with. Is it a foreign key, is it a primary key, that kind of thing. Now, So that's a little bit about the world of constraints. Now, we know that whenever you create constraints, Oracle is keeping track of these constraints. Which table does Oracle use to go and keep track of the constraints that is created? User underscore constraints. And if you were to go inside of that table, there's a specific column that tells you, well, what the name of the constraint is. And then there's another column that actually tells you what the type of the constraint is. So what are those columns inside of the user constraints table that provide that information to you? So we want to go and find out what the name of the constraint is. It would be constraint name. I want to go and find out, given that particular constraint, with whatever name it has, what its type is. Is it a foreign key, primary key? And so it would be constraint type. So you would actually go and do a select constraint name, comma, constraint type from user constraints, and then where, and then you provide the table information. And then the constraint type can be, well, what are the different things that could actually reside in that field? So if we're dealing with a unique key, it's going to be U, primary key. Check constraint.
C.
C. And a check constraint is a not null a check constraint? Yes. Right? And of course, if you want to go and validate for ranges, that would be a check constraint as well. And then finally, we have a foreign key, and the constraint type for that is?
R.
R, that's right. You guys know it's R. That's right. You remember that. Okay, so that's what we have. Now, we did say that, what happens is sometimes you go and create your table. And then after you've created the table, you decide to go ahead and modify or add something to the table. Okay? So for that reason, you have to go ahead and use the alter table syntax. Yes? And so for the alter table, you go ahead and use either the add command or the modify command. Yes? Now, when you're actually wanting to go ahead and modify some attribute about some column, what is the rule that you have to consider? So let's say if you have some column in here that is a char 10, and you want to go ahead and modify its type so that it's no longer a char 10, but rather a number. Is that okay?
Check each column there's the ID of that.
Okay, so we need to go and make sure that, if we want to go ahead and make these kinds of, just significant changes, then the data has to match up, right? So if we've stored a bunch of character data in here already, we cannot go ahead and change it to a number. That's incompatible. However, if we have stored, let's say, character data, and let's just say it's, hello, okay? And let's say we want to go ahead and modify it to still character data, but instead of 10 characters, we'd like to go ahead and make it 5 character. Would that be okay? You don't like it? How about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? So that still fits, right? Is that 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That looks like 5. Do you see 6?
Are you spelling it wrong?
Hello? Is
Oh, I thought you said modify. Sorry, just kidding.
okay, all right. For a minute there,
Your head's covering the hello, so I can only see the modify.
Oh, my head.
Arrows pointing at it.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Sometimes you can begin to sort of doubt yourself, by the way, talking about doubting yourself, has it ever happened, where you wake up in the morning and you're wondering, like, who am I? No, I mean, where you don't even know, you feel like you're just not grounded. You don't like your spouse, your family, it's so like, none of it is hooked into anything. Has that happened to you? Where you feel like something is going on, you're having like an out-of-body experience all of a sudden. Well, anyway, it's a confusing world. When you go ahead and drill me like now, and you say, what, this is 6, then you put me in that same mode, like I'm going, what? Is it really 6? Is it possible? Maybe I'm not seeing this right. All right, well, anyway. Okay, so there's that. Now, so you have to be careful, when you're modifying to make sure that whatever modification is taking place is not going to go and affect the actual data underneath the scenes. So, and then, now, we said that if you want to go ahead and take a look at add and modify, and you want to go ahead and, let's say, deal with constraints. Okay, so you want to go ahead and modify some, well, you want to go ahead and just, associate these columns with some constraint. We said that in terms of the syntax that you're looking at, the syntax is going to be a little different for these two. Now, what is the point that I made with regard to the syntax? How can you go ahead and sort of feel comfortable with what the syntax is going to look like with regards to, just associating a column with a constraint? Do you remember? No, it looks like you guys are having an out-of-body experience as well, aren't you? Okay. All right, so let me go and share with you what is going on. If you remember, which of course apparently you don't, okay? I indicated that when you actually go ahead and go back up here, and when you go to the create table statement, when you are actually creating a constraint, like in this case a primary key, and you're associating it with a column, you no longer have to go and identify the column, correct? Because it looks like this, but there's a particular syntax that is involved with that, and that syntax is different from this syntax right here. Well, when you're actually wanting to go and use the alter table syntax, it just so happens that if you were to go in and take a look at the pattern of the actual syntax, when you're looking at the alter with the add, it begins to look very much like what you would do at the table level. If you were to go ahead and use the modify syntax, you will find that the modify syntax, it begins to look very much like what you would do at the column level. If you don't believe me, check it out. But I know you guys are not going to check it out. You're not, are you? But if you do, I think you'll just see that that's really what's going to happen. All right. Now, so given that quick synopsis, does anyone have any questions? Yes?
It has nothing to do with that, but it's about the normalization 1.5 assignment. I'm looking at the instructions for it right now, and it doesn't say what format the file you want. Do you want it a Word document? Or
So that very file that I gave you, you just fill in the cells in the table that I provided.
You don't want an Excel spreadsheet?
No. So it's that file, that Word document. You just fill in the blanks in the table.
What do
And
we do with the number 2 that you have to create our own?
so you create your own.
Using that document?
So you just take that document that you have, you just go and create this blank table, just like the one right above it, and you fill it up with your own tables and your own columns and stuff.
That's all I was trying to figure out.
Okay, yeah. Anyone else? Nothing. Okay, well, I guess we are ready to go and explore new frontiers. All right, so I don't remember exactly what we did. Where are we at? We did all this. We did this add. Oh, and then you guys, did we do this already? Oh, so this is where we left off. Before we do continue on with this, I'd like to go on, this is not an inspiring class by any means, nor is the stuff that I say by any means inspiring. Probably it's more uninspiring than anything else. But there is this one quote that we have in the book, which I think is wonderful, especially for those of you who are thinking about getting into any kind of a relationship. I think people would just melt if you were to go and just read stuff like this. Look at that. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Just walk right beside me and be my friend. Doesn't that just make you want to cry? Doesn't it? Now look at that. You're thinking no. That you're not moved in any way by what you have just read here.
I'm not very sentimental.
All right. Okay, is there anyone else besides him who's not moved by what you've just read? All right. Okay, so this is great. You're not moved either.
No, I have.
Oh, you have a question about this quote?
Can we work on an example practically so we can see what same the things that we just taught us?
Oh, you mean all the stuff that we talked about?
Yeah.
All this constraint and all that stuff that we talked about?
Because on the board I couldn't get it.
suppose, well, you know, I mean, really all these examples that I've provided here, you know, I
Maybe
mean,
one of them or two of them.
you know, I think, you know, I mean, I don't know how far to take this. I mean, here is like an actual example right there. Here we have a table patient. And then, you know, this table patient has, let's say, a primary key. You can go ahead and make patient ID a primary key. And then, so what you do is you can go ahead and just make that primary key. And that would be at the column level. Or you could actually go ahead and put primary key and then put patient ID here. And that would be a primary key at the column level. But apparently you're thinking you want more than this, right? Well, like, what are you looking for? What do you want from me? no, I mean, what do you have in mind? So, okay, so let me go and share with you this much. You know, this class is a back-end class. And what I mean by back-end is that it is doing the stuff that, you know, when you're actually interfacing with some application, you don't really see the stuff being stored. It is being stored for you behind the scenes, and it's being organized for you behind the scenes. I think what we are normally used to seeing is, you know, some interface where you're actually typing in the first name, the last name, that, and then you hit submit, you know, and then something happens. Well, that thing that's happening is this stuff is actually going to some table. And so I don't show you anything with the front end screens. All I do is I just go ahead and tell you what's going on with regards to the back end. So it would be nice to be able to go and see the entire thing, but unfortunately we don't have time to go ahead and work on the front end, the logic, and the back end. So all I can do is just with these pictures and with this stuff, just show you what that is. But if you come up with an idea, you let me know, and then we can elaborate more on this.
If you want a front-end component, I can make one for you using PHP.
Yeah, there it is.
That's
All right. Any other questions? All right, so it says, what is the difference between table level, column level? What happens if you don't give a constraint a name? What keyword do you use? Oh, look at that. What constraint do you have to create at the table level? What constraint do you have to create at the column level? We didn't talk about this. What constraint do you have to go and create at the column level? We know that at the table level, it would be a composite key of some sort. But what about column level? What is it that you have to do at the column level? Well, we didn't talk about this, but if you're wanting to go and create a not null constraint, that has to happen at the column level. If you want to go ahead and create a default, which means that when you're inserting a record into the table, if you don't want to provide a piece of information for that particular column, then there's a default value that it's going to be assigned to. And so default and not null are things that can only happen at the column level. And what I mean by that, because now you say it's practical, I feel like I need to actually show you something. It's not much, so don't expect that. So what is going on is, we're saying that, you know, what you could do is you could actually go ahead and say not null and then comma. So this would be something that happens at the column level, okay? Or maybe this one right here, we could say default and then Smith. Because everyone who actually is born in this nation, they have the last name of Smith by default, right? There's so many Smiths. It's got to be the case. Is it Doe? You're right. Doe would be another one. Okay. Yeah. All right. What is it, you know, from where we come from? What's a common last name that everyone has? Do we have one?
We have a lot of them.
We have a lot of. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
Ashwadi,
Ashwadi, Hassan.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So anyway, we all have the same disease, no matter where you go. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and talk about unique constraints. Okay. So this is another constraint, and it's really very much like a primary key. Now, you know, the one mistake that folks make is that when they want to go ahead and do a unique key, they feel like, just like we said, primary key, we need to go ahead and make this unique key as well, but there is no key, it's just unique, okay? And all the rules that we talked about apply to unique. So look at that, this is happening at the column level. And so then this means that if you actually were to go ahead and put in information that is a duplicate, it'll give you an error message. And interestingly enough, the error message that you get, you take a look at this. Does that look familiar? Isn't that the same error message that you got when you actually went ahead and violated a primary key constraint? So, so you have no way of knowing what that is unless you go ahead and look it up in the user constraints table and find out what its type is. Or maybe you actually have access to your original syntax when you created the actual constraint itself. So there's that. Or you could also go ahead, unique, you could just leave it empty if you want, and you're just putting a bunch of nulls in there, and that's fine. Because null, which means void of data, it can be duplicated as many times as possible. Because of course, you're not duplicating when there's nothing in it. You only are checking things against actual data. So, and then once again, you can actually go to the user constraints table. There it is. And you can go ahead and take a look at table name, constraint type, and take a look at that U, which is that unique key that I just created. And we indicated that anytime you want to go ahead and give your constraints a name, you go ahead and use the keyword constraint. There it is. And then you come up with some name, hopefully following the convention that we indicated with a UK, and then there it is. And once again, this is happening at the column level because the column definition is still not done. And once again, the same thing stands, which is when you duplicate, then it'll give you an error message. And you will find that if you were to go into the user constraints table, in this particular case, the name that you gave to it is the name that you will see in the constraint name, which is a lot nicer than this other name that Oracle gave to it. And then just as a primary key, you're able to go and create this at the table level. And so take a look at this. All the column definitions are over and done with. At the end, you go ahead and define your unique key. And there it is. Inside the parentheses, you identify what that is. And then there's the constraint keyword along with a name. And so that's what you have. And of course, you don't have to use the constraint keyword if you want to allow Oracle to go and assign its own name to it. And just like before, so actually, let's go and see. Now, in this case, you notice that we have unique. Now, if we were to go and replace unique with primary key for a moment, let's just go through that imaginative exercise. If we were to go and do that, would we get an error message? If we were to go and replace the unique with primary key, would that be an error message? Let me repeat that again. If you were to go and replace this unique, those two, with the keyword primary key, would it be an error message? You say yes. Why? You cannot have more than one primary key. Okay? And but of course your intent is to have a composite primary key, which is why things actually would happen at the table level. Now, in this case though, when you're looking at unique, would this be an error message? It would not, because how many unique keys can a table have? As many as you want. So, it's very possible where that is unique and that is unique. You see, it's kind of like this. Let's just say that we have column A, column B, and so we have that. So, if this is unique and this is unique, this means I can have 1, 1, I can have 2, 2, I can have, let's say, I cannot have another 1 because of course that's repeated. So when you're just looking at that column in itself, that would be a duplicate. But of course you can have a composite unique key as well, right? Which means we're looking at a combination. And in that case, having a 1 and a 3, that would be fine because we're looking at the two of them together. So in this scenario, you notice that something like this would be fine. And you can also go and have a composite unique key, which is what we have here, a composite unique key. So this is a different way that we would sort of deal with this. Okay. Yes.
So we can make composite unique key and then column level?
Well, no, you cannot make it so. So what I was indicating here, this is not composite. Each one of them is working uniquely by itself. They're separate. So the F name, as you go from row to row, it has to be unique. The L name, as you go from row to row, it has to be unique. While at the same time, you can also go ahead and have a composite as well, which means that the combination of the two of them has to be unique. So you have all those options available to you, which of course is something that you don't have available to you for a primary key. And then, just like a primary key, if you decide to go ahead and add or modify things after the fact, you could. Alter a table. And then look at that, add. And then all this constrained keyword, as you're seeing. And then take a look at that, unique patient ID. And I submit to you that if you were to go and take a look at this syntax, and take a look at the syntax for what happens at the table level when you were creating a unique key, it looks very much the same. Now, if you're using modify, you will find that once again, this looks very much like things happening at the column level. So, the table level and the column level. Now, the only reason why I go ahead and emphasize the table level and the column level is because you're trying to sort of memorize this. You're trying to find out if there's any kind of rhyme or logic to this. And I think if you just recognize that this syntax is the same as that stuff right there, there's just less to remember. Maybe. Okay. And then here we go. This is add, and then there's of course no constrained keyword, which means that Oracle will assign a name, and there's unique, and so there is the composite unique key that we're looking at. So there it is. We're done with unique keys. We're done with primary keys. Adding it while you're creating a table, or doing it after the fact using the alter table syntax. Now let's go ahead and look at check constraints. And check constraints here would be an example. So let's look at height. We're thinking that we want to go and make sure that everyone is more than 10 feet high for this particular table that we have. That's quite tall, all right? How tall is LeBron James? He's like, what? He's like, is it, no, he's got to be 7 or something. He's not 7? No?
6'8".
6'8".
He's-
6'8".
Well, you guys know this like it's just, oh, I need to check this. All right, so you're saying that LeBron James is 6'8".
Yes.
How tall is LeBron James? That is nice. And look at that, Shaquille O'Neal is 7'1". These are not human beings anymore. Okay. It's interesting. When you look at husbands and wives, I think the norm is for the wives to be smaller. I take a look at my sister and her husband. Like the husband is like really like this tall, and my sister is like this tall. They're like really just. You look at it, you go, what is going on? Now, in my case, I am like this tall, and then my wife is. She proposes that she's actually a little taller than I am. And then every once in a while, she wants to piss me off, so she wears these high heels. And then she goes over. And then I go, what the hell are you doing? That just makes me feel like such a weak human being, okay? So this idea of, being tall is a big deal. And that's why I came up with this example, because it's just somewhere in my unconscious mind, it just bothers me, and I think it just came out. Well, anyway, so we want people who are 10 feet high, at least, more than 10. So anyway, there's the check condition. So if you actually go ahead and put in anyone who's smaller, then there's going to be a problem. So here's someone who's 9 feet, and that is going to go ahead and give you a violation. Now this guy right here is 19 feet, and so look at that, John Doe, okay, so that would be okay. And of course you can go ahead and have this at the column level, or you could have this at the table level. Now, one thing that you will recognize when you're looking at check condition is that whether you're looking at it at the column level or at the table level, guess what? The syntax is exactly the same. So there's nothing to remember, okay? Now, of course, just like before, the constraints that we're creating is being given a name by Oracle, and you may not want that. And so take a look at this. Here's the constraint that has been created. It's a check constraint, and we don't like it, and that's why we can actually go ahead and create a name. So constraint, once again, is the keyword, the name, and then everything else is exactly the same as before. And then the same thing is true with this. Once again, you will find that the syntax between those two, column level, table level, are exactly the same. And then notice the name that I just gave to it, it's right there in the user constraints table. And then what you could do is you could actually go ahead and use, look at that, the modify command or the add command, and it's all good. Now, one question that comes up is, let's just say that you create this constraint, a check constraint, where the height is like greater than 10. And you realize at some future point that you want to modify this height, this check constraint, so that the height is, let's say, more than 8 feet long as opposed to 10. And the question is, can you go ahead and just issue the modify command? And the answer would be no. So whenever you're dealing with constraints, if you want to go and make changes to the constraints, guess what? You have to go ahead and drop the constraint and you have to recreate the constraint. That's a must. So there's no modifying the constraint. Now you may actually go and say, well, wait a minute. You're using the keyword modify, so apparently you are modifying the constraint. Well, no, I'm not doing that. You see, what happened is when you go and take a look at height, at first there was nothing associated with it. And so in essence, really what we're doing is we're modifying some attribute about height, and we're doing it for the very first time, this check constraint that we've just created. But then if we want to go out and touch that check constraint, it requires that we drop and we recreate. There it is. The not null constraint can only occur at the column level as we indicated. And so if you were to go ahead and take a look at this, you will find that when we go to the user constraints table, if you were to go ahead and take a look, you will find that not null constraint is actually a check constraint. That's the category that it belongs to. And so there is that. And then here we go, add patient. So just to go ahead and prove what we have indicated with regards to the add, whatever syntax you're using at the table level, that's what you would use for the add. And take a look at this. I'm saying add, and I go ahead and put in like the column and then not null, and Oracle will give you an error message. Add, not null. Oracle will give you an error message because we said that not null is a constraint that you need to go ahead and place at the column level, yes? And add, the syntax is the syntax you would put at the table level. That's what it looks like. And that's why modify is the key word that you go ahead and use if you want to go and do a not null after the table has been created. So how you guys doing? All right.
So add is only when you're creating the table. Once the table is created, you only do modify.
No, the point that I was making is that you already create the table. Okay, you create the table. And then you're going to go ahead and alter the table after it's been created. Okay. Now you have two options. You have the add option and you have the modify option. Okay. Now what is going on is you will find that you'll be able to go ahead and add, let's say, columns. You'll be able to go ahead and add constraints. Okay. You will find that whatever syntax you go ahead and put in here to go ahead and put a constraint, whatever the constraint, whatever the syntax was that you used when you were creating a table level constraint, that syntax will look very much the same as what you would do when you're using the add syntax. Now when you're dealing with a modify though, the syntax that you would put here to deal with a constraint, it's going to look very much like the syntax that you would use at the column level. Yeah? Or is that still not happening for you?
Somewhat.
It's somewhat happening, okay. So just once again, if you have create table and you say like, I don't know, L name, well, let's say patient ID, and let's just say number, and I say primary key. I do that, okay? So this is happening at the column level. Okay, let's just say that I didn't do this, okay? I just said patient ID number. If I wanted to go ahead and use the alter table syntax, alter table, whatever, A, I would actually go ahead and say modify patient ID, let's say primary key. You notice this looks very much kind of like that. I mean, we don't have the type because we already have defined the type, so we don't put that in there. But you know, we just go ahead and identify the column and then that. Now, there is another way that you could do this. You could also go ahead and do a create table, forgive my bad handwriting, okay? And then you have your patient ID, and you say number. And then you're done with the column definition. But then you want to go ahead and define the primary key. You say primary key, and then you have to go ahead and put in PID. So this is what the syntax looks like at the table level syntax. You will find that if you wanted to go ahead and use now the alter table A, instead of using modify, you go ahead and use add. You go ahead and put down primary key PID. What you notice is that this syntax looks very much like that syntax. That's the formula. All right.
Thank you.
Yes. So here's another one. Here we have a bunch of constraints. So here we have a check constraint. There it is. And the check constraint has a name given to it. And look at this, I'm using the between clause. I say where the height is between 5 and 10. Now when we go ahead and use the between clause, it means that what is valid is something between 5 and 10, and it's inclusive of these endpoints, which means that 5 is actually valid, 10 is actually valid, along with 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, here's another one, where weight is between 10 and 100. Once again, when you go ahead and use the between clause, it is inclusive of these endpoints. Now, what about this one? Let's say when we're looking at gender, okay? We don't want people to just go ahead and put in whatever, okay? There are only certain letters that would be allowed for gender. Now, although this is kind of outdated, okay, this needs to be updated. But you know, we're saying that when you go ahead and insert gender, you need to go ahead and put in only male or female. We have other categories, but for the time being, let's just go with that, okay? We have male, female, and notice that the way that I do this, I just go ahead and I have parentheses here, I have parentheses there, I have parentheses here and here to go and identify the set of data that I need to go ahead and deal with. Now, if I want to go, so it becomes male, female, and if I'm looking for uppercase and lowercase, then I need to go ahead and identify male, female. So this means that when we are inserting, if we go ahead and grab any of this, it would be valid. But if the user puts in something else, like an R, that would be invalid. And so that would be a violation, and no inserts would be allowed. Keep in mind that all of these constraints that we're placing, it's only meant to go ahead and check the inserting of the data to make sure that the data is not bogus. Yeah? Okay. You know, I'm looking at you guys, and you guys are just looking at me. And I don't even know what that really means. I mean, I have some guesses in my head as to what that means. It means that no one should be allowed to go and speak for this long. That's really what that means. You don't think so? That's not what that means? You know, sometimes I feel like that's really what it means. I'm actually just very, very tempted to go ahead and just change how this is being done. You know, where we just don't do this. Yeah, go ahead.
So you said the between clause was inclusive. Is there a non-inclusive version of it?
Yeah, there is a non-inclusive. And the non-inclusive would be where you say, I guess maybe we should just clean this up. The non-inclusive would be if I was to go ahead and just take this piece right here. And let me just write it down here. Okay. It would be where height is greater than 5 and height is less than 10. And so you need to go ahead and explicitly put in that criteria. And the one mistake that folks make is that, you know, they don't include height in both scenarios. When you're using the between clause, you just go ahead and make reference to height one time. But when you're actually using the and clause, you need to go ahead and indicate height every single time. All right, so now that we have done all this, we are looking for someone to go ahead and help us out with these check exercises. So, yeah. Okay. So what do you think? Look at that. Drop the person recreated with his primary key defined at the table level and the unique key at the column level, and give your primary key constraint a name. And then this is after the table's been created, create a not null constraint at date of birth, insert data to verify the constraints are correct, and create a check constraint such that the salary is greater than 1,000 or 10,000, and insert data to verify. So let's go ahead and just say, you know, whoever wants to go and come up here, we'll have them do like 2 of these questions. So who wants to go ahead and do this? All right, so someone who feels like they have not participated too much and they want to go ahead and contribute to this class. How you doing? Right there. Right there. How you doing? Yeah. You want to do it? Why not? Okay, you want to do it right next to you? Okay, all right, so this is great. You know, I think I know what the problem is. There's not enough of an incentive. I need to go ahead and bring in food. Well, let's see here. Let me see what I have in my backpack here. What did my wife put in here that I have not eaten? Oh, look at this. I have grapes. Do you want grapes? All right, well, I'll just have them while you're speaking. All right. Ooh, great. Notice, since we said that the primary key's at the table level, he said that, you know, I'm not going to deal with it. So he's defined the person ID. Even though we say it's a PK, he didn't put the primary key because it's going to be defined at the table level. Or chart 2. Now, do we need that? What about this parentheses right here? Do we need that? We don't need that, right? right, let's see here. Is there, oh, okay, so we're done with that. Look at that, we have the primary key. Is this, are we good with that primary key, by the way? Does anyone, do we need to do something with that primary key? Constrained person ID, PK, okay, so we like that. And then primary, so at this point, do we know which one of these is a primary key? Because you know this is happening at the table level, right? So what corrections do you think need to be made? Someone?
Primary key.
You need to go and say primary key. Okay, so we need to say primary space key. And then what?
Put the column name.
And then in parentheses put the column name. That's right, okay. Well, okay, so we have that. I mean, you have done so well. I think people just want you to stay here and do more. After the table has been created, create a not null constraint on date of birth. There it is, alter, because it's happening after the fact. Notice he's using modify, and that's because not null is happening at the column level, right? And so modified syntax looks very much like the modify, so that's perfect. We might as well just continue on. I mean, I know I said 2, but why not 3? So insert data to go and verify that your constraints are enough or correct. So okay, someone, let's go ahead and find out. Who wants to go and help us out with the insert? Yes, all the way in the back. What do you think? Go ahead, give it to us. Try. Something. Yes. Insert into, okay, then go ahead. Person, okay. And then what? Values, okay, we like that, okay. And then we need the open parentheses. And then whatever is textual, it goes inside of single quotes, and whatever is numeric, you just write it out. So person ID, notice it's a number, so he just writes it out. And then SSN. Now SSN is a char, right? So that needs to be enclosed in single quotes. And then we have Smith as the L name, and then we have salary. Okay. And then we have the date of birth. And okay, so how do we like the date of birth? Now it's going to be in single quotes, the date of birth. What format do we need to go and put the date of birth in? What do you think? There's a special format, right? What is that format that Oracle understands? Yes.
Day, month, year, right?
Okay, it's day, month, year,
Yeah.
but how do we deal with the month? How does it want the month? Does it want it to be like in number format or in letters? Letters, okay, and it doesn't want like all of it, or does it want only a few of those letters? A few. How many is few? 3 is a good number, I like it. Okay, so there it is, 30 April 1990. Now, and it can be a 2-digit or a 4-digit. Okay, so he's put in 4 digits, so that's perfect. And then we go and put a parentheses right there to go and end this. Now, at this point, we have not confirmed or verified that this is actually correct, right? Because that's just one insert. If I want to go and check the unique key, I need to go ahead and what? Put in another insert, right? So you can just go ahead and like copy out. So, right. So at this point, look at that. He's trying to duplicate the 111, which means that that's a violation of the primary key. And but he's not violating the unique key. So how do you violate the unique key? All right, that's great. So there's that violation as well. Okay, and then the rest of it, whatever, who cares? you know, you've done so well, we might as well just have you finish the very last one as well. Create a check constraint such that the salary is always greater than 10,000. Insert to verify. So he's thinking, you know, look at this. He makes, you know, these claims that you'll just do 2 questions, and then, you know, once you're here, we make you do like 5 questions. So something has happened to my reputation already. Can't take my word anymore. Salary, look at that. Check salary greater than 10,000. And so in this case, what is the name of this constraint? What name do we have? What do you think? What is the name? Do we know?
Name of constraint.
That constraint has a name. Every constraint has a name, right? What is the name? What is it? It's a check constraint, but what name do we have that we assign to this? Because we said that all constraints, either we give it a name using the constraint keyword. Oracle will give it a name. Right. Okay. And then when we want to go ahead and confirm this, how do we need to go ahead and violate, right? So when we go ahead and do an insert, we need to go ahead and violate the salary. And so this means that if I was to go ahead and, I guess we're going to do it. So look at that. That's a violation of the primary key. That's a violation of the unique key. And right now we're going to go ahead and see a violation. Is that a violation?
Yes.
900? Yes, because we are expecting the salary to be greater than 10,000, and that's 900. And normally when you actually go ahead and do any kind of an error checking, you go ahead and check, so thank you very much, appreciate it. So I think yeah, great. All right. So when you have let's just say we're looking at like salary greater than like, let's just say 10,000, okay? When you want to go ahead and check, what you need to do is you need to go ahead and check 999, okay? And 9, so that's before. And you need to go ahead and check 10,000, which is just right on the target. And you need to go ahead and check that one right there. So when you're wanting to go ahead and confirm your information, you do the before, right on the point, and a little after. Okay, well anyway, so we have that. So at this point, we have become experts at this idea of constraints, but we are not completely done because there is one more constraint here that we need to deal with, and that would be the foreign key. Now the foreign key is a little different. All these other constraints that we have been working with, it's just pertaining to that column. But this one, with a foreign key, there needs to be some mention of a connection between one table to another table, right? That's what a foreign key is. So you need to go ahead and create that connection somehow. And that needs to be represented in the syntax. So let's go ahead and find out what happens. Now, what is a foreign key? A foreign key is really a primary key in some other place, yes? So if you were to go ahead and take a look at these 2 tables right here, patient table and disease table. Notice we have a primary key. Notice we have a primary key. And now we know that there is an association table, and there it is, patient disease. And we know that the foreign key resides on what? Is it the many side or on the one side?
On the many side.
On the many side. And guess what? Patient disease is the many side. And look at the way we do it. So here we have patient ID. There it is. That's a column. And it seems to have the same name as that. It doesn't have to, but it does. And that makes it nice and convenient. And so this is a foreign key because it's a primary key that is sitting in some other table. And then we need to make sure that this type and this type are exactly the same because we're storing really the same information in some other table. Then we go ahead and use the references. You remember I said that when you're actually in the user constraints table, there is this column called what? Constraint type. And R is the word or the letter that it uses to go and represent that it's a foreign key, well, that's because of references. So this says the patient ID that we have and the patient disease is going to refer to or reference the patient table, which is this one, and specifically the patient ID. So this is how we're actually creating that connection. So look at that. The patient ID here is connecting to the patient ID here. So I need to go ahead and define what that table is and what the column in the table is. And that's a foreign key right there. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Now, here's another one. Because this is like any other constraint, and it can have a name. And so if you want to go ahead and give your constraint a name, you go ahead and use the constraint keyword. You give it some name. And then the rest of the syntax is exactly like before. You go ahead and say, you know what, this disease ID that I'm looking at, it's going to go ahead and refer to the disease table. But you notice something that is different in this case. What is the difference between this foreign key that I've defined and this other one? What is the difference in the syntax?
It's only referencing the table.
It's only referencing a table, and apparently it's sufficient. Why?
It's only one column.
Well, it may be multiple columns, but
We have only one primary key.
we have only what?
Primary key.
Yeah, because remember what the definition for a foreign key is. A foreign key is really a primary key in some other table. So if you go ahead and define what that other table is, it says, oh, okay, it's a primary key in that table. In this table, there can only be one primary key, so it will make the connection to the primary key. In this case, you're being very, very explicit, and that's good. I mean, syntactically, someone else seeing it, they know exactly what's going on, but you don't have to. And then, of course, here we have a primary key that is composites. Now, what is interesting is that when you go ahead and take a look at this, it has this stuff right here that tells us that we're looking at a foreign key. We're looking at the patient disease. We're looking at the patient disease. Why? Because we have two foreign keys. And then each foreign key has its own name. I'm sorry, not that. Each foreign key has its own name, this one and this one. And then that's how we know it's a foreign key. And this one right here is kind of interesting, but we'll look at that a little later, so not to worry about that. But the key point to keep in mind is that what we're looking at here is that we have one foreign key, another foreign key. And each of them has its own name. One, Oracle has given a name. The other one, I have given it a name. And you can see that in here. Here's the one that I gave a name to. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that when I want to go ahead and, so here is the patient table, here's the disease table, and now at this point, I go into the patient disease table. I go ahead and put in 111. Is that valid? Yeah, because I've already defined 111. And I put in a 222. Is that valid? Yes, I have defined a 222. So the foreign key is going to go ahead and match up the information. What about this one? 333. Is that defined in the parent table? Is 333 defined in the patient table?
No.
No. Guess what? That's a violation of the foreign key. Or is 33 defined in the disease table? No, that's a violation. And that's the nice thing about setting up the foreign key. It actually tells you about those violations. All right, so yeah, so that's what's happening. All right, so knowing what we know now, let's go ahead and give you some assignments. we'd like to go ahead and give you another assignment, and that is the constraints. Well, I can't give you the entire thing, but you can, well, I guess maybe constraints is not so good, because we haven't talked about everything. Okay, so forget that. It was a good try. Let's see what we have here. Group insert. Well, I guess I can't give you that either. Create. We've already given, okay, oh. And then there's a homework assignment. So a homework assignment is different from a group assignment in that you want to go ahead and work on this individually on your own. And I'll go ahead and make this available to you. Now you don't have all the information, but you have enough to go and sort of get started with. So you'll be working on this stuff. But I want to go ahead and tell you what is going on with the homework assignment that is so different from a group assignment. You will notice that with the homework assignment, there are all these questions, and of course, just like before, the information is going to go into these white cells. And, but what happens is, you will have to go ahead and do these questions in the order in which they appear. You would, of course, be doing the exact same thing when you're working on the group assignment, but it's much more important on the homework assignments. Why? See, in these homework assignments, what occurs is, sometimes I ask you to go ahead and do things that are problematic, which will cause you to get an error message. And getting an error message is not necessarily wrong. You see, when you're working on the group assignment, everything must work. But in the homework assignment, there are some times that you'll have problems, and those problems are to be expected. So you need to go ahead and make sure that you do it in the right order. Now, how do you know if you've actually done this correctly? Well, this means that you need to understand what the idea of a foreign key is, what the idea of a primary key is. So from a logical standpoint, you must know really what's going on behind the scenes and when it would be valid to actually get an error message. So just because something is working, it doesn't mean that you've actually done this correctly in the homework assignment. So just keep that in mind. And the other piece that I want to go and share with you is that you'll be creating tables and you'll be inserting data. Now, the computer that you guys are going to be inserting all this information into, every once in a while, I think I mentioned this to you, I have to turn off the computer and I have to turn it back on. I told you this, right? Guess what happens when I turn off the machine? All the data is erased. Which means what? Which means you're going to have to go ahead and re-enter all the data. Now that's a lot, right, to go ahead and do this. So this is what I would recommend to you. I would recommend that when you're working on the assignment, at the end of the day, you're going to be turning in this document to me. That's what you're going to be turning in. But what you would want to also go ahead and do is you'd like to go ahead and maybe you should open up some kind of a text document. And you should just go ahead and comment this. So you can say, you know what, this is for question number 1. That's a common symbol in Oracle, right? Dash, dash. And, or 1A, for example, 1A. And then you should go ahead and put in your, stuff like, I don't know, describe, table A. And then dash, dash, 2A. And then you say, like, I don't know, describe table BA, okay? And so, when you are actually wanting to go ahead, when I turn off my machine and I turn it back on, since everything is gone, all you need to do is you just need to go ahead and copy everything and you need to paste it into Oracle. As a matter of fact, what you could do is, since you don't really know when I'm going to go ahead and do it, although I will go ahead and alert you and let you know that I'm clearing the machine, but what you could do is you could just go ahead and just right from the get-go, right up at the top, say drop table TA. And here, drop table BA. So you clear everything, and then you go ahead and do all this stuff. Because if you've already created a table, you can't recreate that same table. You have to drop it. So basically, you just go ahead and put in all your syntax, you copy and you paste, and so this way, when I reset the machine, you can just get back to where you were when you left off. Does anyone have any questions?
When is this one due? not tomorrow.
So,
because you have-
no, this is not due tomorrow, so we don't have enough information at this point, but I'm just putting it out there so you can start working on it. Okay? Good. All right, well, good luck to you.